Yeah. Okay, so welcome to week 2. Last week Tim Chester gave the lecture because I was in town, but I was at a meeting with Northwestern Energy. Northwestern Energy has donated $1 million to Bozeman and $1 million to Helena to do a couple of renewable energy installs. And they're going to do the same thing in Missoula, and they're going to do it all in the PV. Northwest Energy said, hey, let's get the most bang for our buck, one big array somewhere, maybe visible by the interstate, whatever, people drive by and go, look, Missoula has solar. But the community said, well, maybe better than that, let's put it on all the high schools so that when the parents go to the football game, the basketball game, or the play, or the choral concert, they see it's there. So you might not get as much bang for your buck because there's more labor involved and more moving parts, but the idea is let's show show the community that Missoula is solarizing. So that's where I was last week. I have a legitimate excuse. Also, I think I've updated now, so the quiz and the homework for week 2 are both available. There are several lectures. These were all recorded and YouTubeable from last week, so I go through energy balance, chemical balance, and mass balance. And that's, in a lot of ways, just getting right back to the first law of thermodynamics, where, whatever mass comes in has to go out somewhere else. In terms of chemistry, it's going to come out as H2O, not H3O or H2O5 or something. That's the chemical balance. And then the energy is whatever, and typically in bioenergy, whatever chemical energy goes in, thermal energy is going to come out in general, is the field. So that's where I went through, and I think those lectures should be good to go and more than prepare you for that. So with that, I want to introduce Frantz Larson, and I wish I had a photo here, but if you've got a website or something you want to go to that shows your face, or LinkedIn or whatever, I'll get you a fresh page here. And another big point, we just went through this with Brad Van Wert out of Bozeman. He's out working in the solar PV industry, and one of the main goals of the energy technology program is to prepare students to work in industry, to get jobs. We have a culinary department, we have a welding department, we have a nursing, et cetera. So it's like, train folks in the trade. So bioenergy is a big part of renewable energy, but it's not something that we talk a whole heck of a lot about in Montana. We've got a lot of woody biomass sitting out in the forest that typically burns, either unintentionally or sometimes intentionally. We've got a lot of agricultural waste that, absolutely, I don't really know where it goes, if it's being put to use or not. We also have a lot of food waste that just heads off to the landfill, and there have been some states that have actually banned putting food in the landfill. Might be a long time before Montana gets there. It seems like we're usually a decade or 3 behind on things like that. But that said, there are groups here in Missoula that are moving away from these kind of wasteful models. So and I know, Eric, if you can talk a little bit about your experiences in Thailand, some of the practices you saw over there, as well as some of the chemistries that you're dealing with, I think that'd be perfect. So I might have you just come a little closer to the microphone, so here somewhere, and Shauna, if you want to scooch in, that's fine too, but I'll let you have it. So if you want to
just open up other tabs on this.
Yeah, if you want to click a fresh tab there, you can just kind of dink around for something.
So more or less what I do is work in the motorsports industry. However, over the last few years, especially my time spent over in Thailand, there's been a lot of demand for people that want to use ethanol as an alternative fuel source.
Okay. Yep.
As we talked over there, most of the ethanol comes from sugarcane.
Right.
Obviously, it's very easy to grow in the tropical environment. From a performance or racing aspect of things, ethanol has been quite popular for a long, long time, as is methanol for an alternative race fuel.
Right.
But yeah, only recently has it seemed that a lot of the general public has wanted to switch over to start using ethanol as an alternative fuel source. Obviously, in Thailand, they don't have a ton of oil or crude oil options.
Right.
So if they can produce their fuel from ethanol, it keeps a lot more money within their own economy.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't have anything to show some of the more general streetcar use vehicles for ethanol, but we did everything from little eco cars to marine engines, like, you know, outboard Honda, Yamaha, whatever it is. If it runs on gasoline and isn't a two-stroke, it's quite simple to convert to run on basically any alcohol fuel.
Okay. Okay.
This is probably the best example I have of something that's related to running a car on ethanol.
So is brewed? I mean, brewed is obviously you brewed something.
Yeah, it's
the fermentation process.
Exactly. That was actually completely unintentional. We went with brewed and kind of had the little molecular structure up here, just because alcohol fuels are always something I was interested in, but nothing that I necessarily thought was going to be the majority of our business.
Sure.
But over the past 6 years more or less, it's definitely headed in that direction. So it's kind of worked out in its own good way there.
Okay. Now, when you say your business, are you based in Montana?
We're based in Montana.
Okay.
I opened another branch over in Thailand when I was there.
Neat.
I've got a lot of customers in South Korea where I was at before Thailand. South Korea is kind of similar to Montana in the fact that they don't have the option to use ethanol. They can't order ethanol by the drum from anywhere. They can't go to the gas pump and get E85 anywhere. It's just not available.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, Thailand obviously really wanted to expand on that.
Now, why are people interested in using ethanol? Because I know it has a lower energy density than gasoline. So what are the benefits?
Sure, definitely. As you just mentioned, the benefit being the higher octane rating and the lower EGTs, more or less. When you run a internal combustion engine on ethanol versus, say, gasoline, you'll get lower EGTs from the ethanol. It actually produces less heat, as I'm sure you know, as it burns.
Yeah, remind us what EGTs are.
Oh, exhaust gas temperature.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's fine.
I'll have to ask you guys to explain a lot of things too. I'll rattle off car things like that all the time.
Okay.
So the exhaust gas temperature is actually lower with ethanol, but you can actually produce more power because the octane rating is so much higher. You can run much more ignition advance, or in the case of a car like this, it's fitted with a turbocharger, and you're allowed to push a lot more boost or positive pressure from the turbo into the engine without any pre-ignition or detonation, which immediately destroys pistons more or less. This car is actually from South Dakota, if I remember right. And one of the big things, especially in America, is obviously you can't find ethanol at a lot of gas stations, so the flex fuel thing becomes important. Now that's another. It's very easy to install a sensor that can read the ethanol content, and then basically the tune adjusts parameters based on that ethanol content, and more or less algorithms that you get to play with the variables in.
Okay. And then in terms of just dollars per gallon and all that, what's the price point?
Sure. The cost to manufacture ethanol seems to be a bit of a point that gets argued quite often. In Thailand, it was extremely cheap. It was much cheaper to buy a liter of ethanol than, say, a liter of gasoline.
Wow.
As far as actual economy goes from an engine, say this Honda, for example, you'll get within 10% of the economy you would on gasoline, even at 100% ethanol blend, so no gasoline blend at all.
Right.
As long as you don't have your foot in it all the time. if you want to feel the extra horsepower that you can get from tuning on the ethanol, of course, the turbo is going to flow a lot more air into the engine. You're going to have to match that with the required fuel. But if you're just putzing around normal day-to-day driving, or say this wasn't a performance-based car, you could get the economy very, very close to what you could with gasoline, because the ethanol will actually support lean burning.
Yeah.
Basically a leaner than stoichiometric air-fuel ratio,
Right.
and still produce enough power to keep the engine moving.
Okay, cool. It's good. I did not know any of that. I understand the language, but
Sure.
in terms of like what goes in, what comes out, I just did not know that. That's good information.
Let's see if I think I've got another article here from another car that was set up for flex fuel. Yeah. This one just talks a little bit about the knock control, and then we'll have a couple screenshots, I believe, of just some of the software that we use. Yeah, so there's an example. Not a whole lot visually going on in those, but basically these are just aftermarket computers or engine control units that we can install in any engine, wire it up to all the sensors that you want to use, and then you have the ability to tell it to do exactly what you want it to do.
Wow.
So you're not restricted by the factory anymore.
Okay. And what is it? Would you approach an automaker or an engine maker or both, or how do you penetrate the market?
Yeah, the majority of our business, as you can kind of see from these blogs, is basically performance-based customers.
Okay.
They're, especially in the US, I don't want to say the only ones, but almost the only ones that actually see a benefit to using ethanol as a fuel, just because they can make more horsepower and it costs either the same or less than gasoline. It's
now humor me with this. So is it making more horsepower because you have? So I know with ETOH, it's you have 2 carbons. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hydrogens, so you get that extra oxygen added. Now, is the fact that you've got that oxygen already sort of sitting there ready to burn?
Exactly. That's part of it. The octane rating of it would be the other part. So, as I'm sure a lot of people know or recognize, come winter time, you see all the gas pumps more or less will say may contain up to 10% ethanol.
Yeah.
They're doing that to get that extra oxygen. They're oxygenating the fuel, which is basically just a way for the fuel companies, or you could say the government, to try and make it so everyone's car runs slightly leaner, which will produce slightly less emissions. The funny thing about that is all the new cars since 92, basically when OBD1 came into play, have oxygen sensors, so the system works in closed loop. It's always going to target a stoichiometric air-fuel ratio. Adding 10% ethanol is just going to cause the computer in the car to say, oh, we need to bump the fuel trim, how much fuel we're adding to the engine right now, up a little bit, because we don't know why, but because that sensor said so. So a lot of the times you'll get people complaining that, oh, my car doesn't work as good when it's winter because there's ethanol in the tank. The only thing that's going to be causing that is if the car is not up to par, you could say, if there's some problems with it already. And more or less it's just not the right way to try and make an engine run on ethanol. You're basically just putting as much as you can without having too many negative effects. But if you don't actually have an ethanol content sensor, you're kind of fighting a losing battle.
Tell me a little bit more about how you got into the field.
I got into the field pretty young. I got a driver's license. I bought a car. I couldn't afford to pay anybody else to fix it. Started learning a little bit, and through high school basically just started going to manufacturers, like factory training. I got lucky and got a job at Blue Ribbon here in Missoula in the accessories department, and kind of just use that as my in to work with manufacturers and say, hey, I want to come to your training. I want to learn how to use the system for converting cars like this to run on whatever fuel I want. At the time, I couldn't find much of anything like that for, say, at any universities. But now there are a couple specialty, they're not universities, but they offer courses for exactly this type of thing.
Okay, cool. And then Did you teach yourself some of the electronics and the controls then too?
Yeah,
Well? Okay.
Say something like wiring or installing this computer on a modern fuel-injected engine might seem a little bit overwhelming, but it's all pretty basic circuitry. It doesn't take a lot to understand and figure out what's going on. Yeah, it's not really, I mean, it's not that much more than what's in a house per se.
Yeah.
A little bit, but not a lot.
Okay. Cool. So I guess, so tell me a little bit more about what your goals are. I mean, are you actually looking to produce ethanol for high-performance vehicles in Montana? Are you looking to do more on the vehicle side? Where do you see that?
My main goal would just be to try and get ethanol or any renewable fuel more available for people in Montana.
Okay.
When I lived here before I was in Thailand, we were able to buy just more or less pure ethanol, say about 95 to 98% ethanol, 2 to 5% water.
Yep.
At this point, it's not available within the state.
Who's making it then?
It was from a fuel supplier. They weren't making it. They were definitely bringing it in. I couldn't tell you where that one was coming from. Of course, most all of the ethanol in the U.S. seems to come from corn, but not necessarily the most efficient way to get it, in my opinion, but not too bad, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I think in the case of corn, maybe you know this. I'm just humor me. Is the fermentation, is it coming from just using the kernels, the whole stalks? I know there's this whole lignin problem, and digesting like the entire plant. It's just
it doesn't seem like there's much consistency for that necessarily. Some will use everything, and some will use much like you were saying, the kernel, perhaps just the highest in starch that they can then convert to sugar that then they can ferment.
Because you definitely have to go through the glucose.
Yeah. So that's the main downfall, in my opinion, for trying to use corn as we're doing it now. If you're able to start using, say, sugarcane, you can cut a step out of the process from the beginning. One of the big things that I think you just mentioned too, all the food waste that happens, or agriculture waste.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of fruit in the Northwest that ends up falling on the ground and is left to rot.
Sure.
That is prime ethanol.
The apples, the pears.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
So you could literally take that fruit that's just going to rot on the ground and release all the CO2 back into the atmosphere from the bacteria breaking it down, change it to alcohol, and release the CO2 from your car instead of from crude oil.
Get some work out of it.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Okay. Shauna, what do you have for Eric? What questions?
I'm just listening. I don't know. I'm trying to keep up.
Okay. I don't think when we do in alternative fuels, we definitely have an ethanol section. We didn't talk about it in quite the nice practical ways that you just did. But I guess what I would look forward to moving forward in the course is actually, seeing how we might divert waste. And if you want,
absolutely.
Are you doing anything at 5 o'clock tonight?
I should be done by then.
Okay, because I am heading to Solar Guys Talk right now. I should leave now. He's going to be at Bayard from 4 to 5. I'm going to hand out flyers so we can get more students into my summer practicum. I'll give you one on the way out as well, just so you're aware of it. If you want to run a biofuels section there, we can do whatever we want. And then from 5 to 7, it's the zero waste group that I was mentioning.
At Bayard?
They're going to be at, we'll be bar hopping. So we'll start at Bayard.
Missoula, I would expect nothing less.
We'll start at Bayard, and then the zero waste group is at Imagination.
Okay.
They're out on Broadway.
Okay.
So we're gonna go to both.
I like it.
So, the course is running for Shauna and Michael. Eric, that was perfect. Thanks for the good talking.
Thank you.
So the point is like, there is an industry out there. It
Yeah,
exists.
yeah.
I mean, that's what, because sometimes, here we are in academia and we're talking and, but, we're bringing in, someone got today, bringing in, do you have a nickname at all, or do you have a?
No,
Yeah.
just Eric.
It's weird. I was trying to figure out, this little guy, his name's actually Brad, but like his name wasn't on his website. Like,
Oh, okay. Well,
solar guy.
so that is something that I try to avoid. I don't personally want anybody to necessarily know my name or seek me out personally.
Okay.
Please
Go to
contact the business.
There you go.
It will find its way to me very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I just preferred my name could just not be.
Right, okay.
Well, now you're on YouTube.
This will be the secret lecture. Secret lecture.
Well, there's only two of us, so I think
Yeah.
we are.
All right, sounds good.